You guys, today's episode might be the most interesting one I've done yet. I got to talk to Dr. Cara Wells, the founder and CEO of EmGenisys. Her flagship product is a SaaS solution that improves pregnancy outcomes by doing machine learning on videos of embryos. Now, Cara got started by doing her PhD at Texas Tech. She started a company around that PhD work, and through a series of unfortunate events, now has a open lawsuit around what happened with that company and the IP. I'll let her tell her story in this episode. Beyond that, we cover a lot of startup learnings about commercializing your science projects, stock options, advice that every PhD student should know. And guys, I highly encourage you to listen to this episode, hear her story, and share it with anyone you know that can support Cara. This is episode 16 of How Not to Build. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the podcast.
You're welcome. I'm excited.
What are you glad about today, Cara?
Great question. I prepared for this.
Nice.
I'm glad that over the weekend, my final investor came through for me. We closed our $1.5 million fundraise. In fact,
Yay!
subscribed. So I'm super glad about that. That's been a really big lift, a lot of pressure the past year, really.
Wow.
So happy that we were able to close that. Now that that's behind us, I can really focus on growing the business. We're in a good place to do that. I have a lot of travel coming up, so that can be stressful, but it's also a lot of opportunity. So I'm glad about that.
Awesome. What was your a year-long process to get the final investor closed? What was your biggest learning through that year?
My biggest learning the past year was that in-person meetings really are incredibly valuable. We met our lead investor at an in-person event in Kansas City, I believe. And, we were talking during the cocktail hour. We had lunch the next day. And I think that in-person relationship really set the foundation for them to want to go to work for us and help us raise the money. I learned that just because you're fundraising doesn't mean that your business activities need to stop. So all of a sudden, you have to carve out a lot more of your time to grow your business and fundraise. So navigating that and being prioritized with my time, it was difficult, and just how to communicate with these investors. You want to show your traction and everything like that, but you also don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So yeah, just learning how to balance a lot of things at once, but that's our job as entrepreneurs. So
Yeah.
we should be used to it by now.
Do you have any pro tips? I mean, is it a 50-50 split? Like, what does that look like to balance your time?
Well, there's never any balance to my time. It's all the day is going well, and then all of a sudden, investors send you an email needing due diligence items that weren't already in your data room. So I feel like I need to kind of drop what I'm doing and make sure that we get that done, while also needing to close the loop on all other open agenda items that I had that day. So it's really a lot of hurry up and wait, I think, with fundraising.
Okay. Let's see. Is there anything that you are anxious about?
I always have emails that I forget to respond to. So every morning I wake up thinking about that. Anxious about revenue. We were able to launch our product early this year, and I'm finding out that just because you build a product doesn't mean that they will come. You really have to hustle out there and get sales. The fun and very investable part about our company is how novel our product is. It's very different. It's very unique, but it's also disrupting an industry that's been done pretty much with very little to no change for over 50 years. And some of our customers, they want the value, but they're hesitant to completely disrupt the workflow of how they do things and change their internal processes. So I'm finding that our sales cycle can be long. It can take months to get those customers. So, I mean, it makes you anxious for sure.
I just think about how much AI is disrupting. And I know I'm not saying your product is AI, but just thinking about disruptions that are currently happening and going to continue to happen. I don't know, do you have any learning so far or tips that you can share as far as when you're building a product like that you know is going to disrupt your clients, at least while they transition? Maybe it's even going to disrupt the industry. How do you help them in that journey? How do you still show people this is worth looking into, testing out?
Sure. So I think it's really important to know who all of the stakeholders of your company and of your product are, and make sure that you're marketing to all of them appropriately. So, for example, our company has software to evaluate embryo health, and our user is the IVF labs, embryologists, and veterinarians. But these people do work for cattle producers. It's the cattle producers who bear the economic burden of failed pregnancy. They're not technically adept to being our user and our direct customer because they don't handle their own embryos, they don't transfer their own embryos, but we market to them too so they can serve as an influencer upstream to say, hey, I really want to improve our pregnancy outcomes, so please, veterinarian, use our product, and get them to help us as well. So, I mean, a lot of this disruption means I go to conferences where I know not a single person there can pay me directly, but I have to go there with the intention that we're creating momentum, buzz, and interest around our product that will trickle upstream and result in sales.
I like that. So you're going sort of downstream to the end person that's going to benefit from your product, really getting them excited about it. So they're going back to their suppliers, and that's where the competition is, right? I can go with A or B, and for them to say, hey, if you're using this new software, right, like that's what I want. So if you're using that, I'll go with your company instead of your competitor. Okay, nice.
Exactly. I call it the pharmaceutical company approach, when you're watching TV and it's like, ask your doctor about whatever drug today. So we're kind of taking that approach, but with ag tech.
Nice. Smart. Did you come up with that idea?
I kind of believe in fishing where the fish are. So once upon a time, I wanted people to care about my product. So I went and I talked to everyone, and I found out that I had better interest when talking to these cattle producers. They were nicer. They were more excited about our product. They were less hesitant. So I'm like, okay, well, hey, you guys seem to be the path with the least resistance. Let's go to these conferences, and we're not going to exclude the others, but
Right.
if they're the ones who are more eager, then let's go to those conferences, even though we know that they can't be our direct customer.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is what you guys are doing, but my mind even goes to the idea of like kind of the wait lists or the petition approach, where it's like, hey, client A, we've got 10,000 people that would really love to use this product, and I know that you can make a whole bunch more money if you were to sell this product that we're making to them. So you're basically coming to your clients with traction of their clients. Does that make sense?
Bingo. Yep.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. Yeah, and then last question, Cara, what are you hopeful about? What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to seeing what this next chapter is. We've been in development for almost 5 years now. We were able to get our product launch. So I'm, coming into the second and third quarter and fourth quarter of this year with a product that's on the market. I have the money from the fundraise, so I think a lot of my budget and financial pressure is alleviated, and we can figure out how to grow and scale. We have opportunity to work both in Europe and in South America coming up. So
Nice.
I think that with the shotgun approach and trying to target large parts of the world all at once, I am hopeful that this strategy will work out, but I also believe that hope is not a strategy. So, we try to be intended and very intentional with what we do.
What's that Star Wars line? Like you can't run a rebellion on hope or something. And then there's some comeback of like, yeah, but you can't do it without hope either. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. As far as like tapping into the global market with the EU and South America, are you doing that through kind of the same conference circuit, or are there other tactics to reach those folks?
So conferences have really been our bread and butter. It's been the best way to demonstrate our product, get in front of people. We're doing a little bit of marketing, social media, some advertising, but not much. It's really the conferences. And yes, I'm going to Ireland in September to go to a conference. We are also applying for a 2.5 million euro grant in Europe. That should also, if it's funded, give us opportunity to get in front of these customers. And then there's also an agricultural tech show in Brazil in August that we're planning on attending. So
Very cool.
yeah, conferences seem to be where it's at for us.
Yeah, very good. As a US-based company applying for a grant from the EU, how does that work?
That's a good question. I believe that you miss all the shots that you don't take. So I found out last year that Europe has this really big grant. It's called the Horizon Award through the European Innovation Council, and it has lots of different verticals for it. So there's health tech, there's physics, there's optics, and there's also agriculture. I was informed that they didn't have as many applicants for the agricultural section of it. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, that means that the competition is not as stiff. And so you can apply as a US-based company. So the application process, it's 2 steps. First, there's a pre-application. It's like a 10-page application, a video, a pitch deck, and then you can get invited to apply for a full application. So I applied as a US company. We were invited. So now I'm actually setting up an entity in Ireland.
Wow.
And so we're applying with our Irish entity that we formed as part of this.
Interesting.
And that was like a $5,000 5-day process. So pretty straightforward. Wow. Very doable, especially if we get funded. That was well worth the investment.
Right. Is there stipulations as far as like employment or economic value back to the EU, presumably?
Sure. So I've had to study the EU market quite a bit to apply for this grant. And because they're giving us so much money, I will be able to hire a couple of European employees, project managers for this, which sure, that's great for economic development, but it also puts me boots on the ground in Europe. And I told you earlier that in-person relationships seem to be really important. So absolutely, I want European employees over there working for us. Engineering, software development is always a demand for us. I have no doubt that Europe has plenty of great talent over there that we can use. So yeah, we do need to spend a lot of the money over there, but I can pay myself and some of my US team as long as the work that we're paying ourselves to do supports the development of the European company.
Right. Very cool. Okay. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who's taken that approach. That's super interesting.
I'll let you know if it works out.
Yeah. Oh man, I had another question. I don't remember what it was. I think it was something around the 10-page video and pitch and everything. It's so much work. I think that's for me anyway, there's always so much work that goes into things like applying for grants or getting ready for, even just investors. It feels to me like a lot of that is you have no idea how it's going to turn out. Feels like shots in the dark. How do you, going through that now a couple different ways, what do you think is the best thing somebody can do to prepare for, grants, investors, all that sort of thing?
It's true that a lot of investors don't like entrepreneurs that just chase grant money. It does suck up a lot of your time. It is a shot in the dark. And in the early days of this company, I wrote a lot of grants that weren't funded. And every time I'm like, I'm never spending time on another grant ever again. I'm not doing this. I'm swearing off of them. And then like a couple months later, I get mad and I'm like, no, I'm going to take their money after all. And so then I apply for it. Fortunately, now I've really worked out the narrative. I know my problem, my solution, my customer, my technical hurdles, my go-to-market plan. I've written enough of these that every grant is kind of a copy paste with a little bit of customization that I'm much more efficient with them. So applying for these grants to me take a fraction of the time that it did in the early days. So it's not really that much of a time suck. And at this point, I've won a few of them. So I've gotten enough positive reinforcement that it can be worth our time to go after this money. So if I was still losing them, I probably wouldn't be doing that at this juncture, but I feel like I've cracked the code a little bit and it's
Nice.
actually working for me. So I'm like, okay, why not? Not to say that I'm too good for $10,000, but I probably wouldn't spend my time applying for $10,000. But, these big ones that are upwards of $100,000, even $1 million, like this one, I think it's well worth my time.
You should put together a little digital, what do they call it? Like a little playbook, how to get your grants, sell it for $10. You'd be set. You could retire.
Well, if that's the business, maybe I should do that instead.
No, I guess grants are not entirely foreign to you because, you started out with your PhD at Texas Tech, originally kind of made your way into being a founder at your first company. And take us through that journey. How did you, the decision to go all the way to the PhD and then becoming the founder at Embryotics?
Sure. So I think when I started college, I was laser focused on becoming a veterinarian. I loved animals, especially horses. I wanted a career working with them. And I don't think I was really exposed to a lot of careers outside of veterinary medicine prior to going to school to study animal science in 2009, which is when I started. Because getting into vet school is really challenging, a lot of the students are very high caliber, it's very competitive. I wanted to make myself different. So I thought that I could get involved in undergraduate research and have that extra flavor to put on my vet school application. So a lot of professors don't take undergraduates into their labs. And so one professor that I met with, he was very, very enthusiastic about undergraduate research. I asked him, I was like, hey, can I come do research in your lab? And it ended up being a reproductive physiology lab. I also got involved with a program on campus. It was called the Howard Hughes Medical Institute back then, but it's called CISR now, which is like the Center for STEM Research, or acronym like that. I know. I don't even know what it means, but I should because it's a great program.
Sure, yeah.
And they did pay me to do undergraduate research, and they also paid me to go to conferences. And so my undergraduate research project was a specific gravity device to evaluate embryos. And that project ended up being really fun. It got a lot of awards. I got to go to some conferences. And when it came time for me to graduate my undergraduate, I was like, wait, I want to finish this project. And so I ended up getting special permission to skip my master's, and I stayed on for a PhD. I stayed on with that project. And so that's what initially led me to want to get involved in reproductive research instead of going to vet school. I also was especially encouraged because breeding animals are very pampered. I got to work with multi-million-dollar stallions, really nice bulls. These animals are vaccinated. They have nutritionists. They are exercised daily. They live the life. Their health is impeccable. And it kind of seemed to be like a happier side of the animal health industry versus veterinary medicine, which you're constantly dealing with sick animals. So both are rewarding, just different ways, but I really got passionate about reproduction.
Very cool. Okay. So you kind of ended up working some projects through your master's, and then I think you said you stayed on for your master's. Did you continue that into your PhD?
I skipped my master's.
You skipped your master's. Good. I'm always a fan of any kind of dropout situation. We'll say you dropped out of your master's. Yeah. So then when you continued working on kind of in that same field for your PhD, it sounds like?
Same lab, same project. Yep.
Same lab, same project. So then how did that grow into the company? Because from that experience, like you said, you kind of had the science proved, it was doing well at conferences. So then I think with the company, did you start productionizing that same idea, or what happened there?
Sure. So when I was in grad school, I started out doing research on mice with grant-funded studies. And sure, that's cool, but I'm not always certain that mice are the best model to do more valuable species work or human research, but we have to start somewhere, and that's kind of how science works. But I had friends in the animal science department, and we would chat about our projects, especially when we were all graduate students. And a lot of my peers in animal science, they came from like really deep farming, deep animal production backgrounds. They grew up on a farm. And so a lot of them would say, hey, you know what? Like, we're transferring some cattle embryos next week. Do you want to come use your device on them? Or we're transferring sheep embryos. And I was like, well, absolutely. That's really cool. And so I would go out there, I would use my device that I was developing on their embryos and, get that data. And that allowed me to get the 3 publications that I needed to graduate. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, my friends aren't taking the risk on their embryos with a device that could kill them. We didn't know. It hadn't been done before.
Sure.
They were paying for all this. I wasn't paying them. And not because they liked me, not because they wanted to help me, but because they wanted products out in the marketplace that could solve their problems.
Mm.
And for them, they know that pregnancy rates of IVF and embryo transfer were low. I was their friend working on a project to improve pregnancy rates and embryo transfer. And so they're like, hey, if this works, we'd love to help you develop it so we could use it in the future. So that's when I realized that what I'm doing is worth more than a publication or standing by a poster at an academic conference. It's something that could actually impact the people and the animals that our research was trying to help. I did not have a plan or intent to commercialize that research back then. I didn't even know that that was really an option that was available to me. But I was in love with that project. It was my baby, and I wanted to be the one to see it through. I graduated, and obviously that IP belongs to the university. And being a pretty normal person, I wasn't just voluntarily working in the lab after I graduated on that project.
Right.
Graduation was pretty eye-opening for me. I thought that I was a pretty good student, had good grades, had good experience, whatever. And I really realized that after graduation, that universities graduate way too many PhDs than what the job market has to offer. And companies don't always like PhDs. They think that we're overqualified for some of these positions and we're going to jump the first time a better opportunity comes up, which is probably true, to be honest. They don't want to pay for a PhD when they can pay for someone with a lesser degree. And so I was applying for hundreds and hundreds of jobs and I was just not getting responses.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this is not the outcome that I thought my hard work doing graduate school research would result in. And so I ended up taking a job doing human IVF, making $21 an hour. And I was like, is this really what 7 years of college gets you?
Yeah. Do you have advice in looking back on that now and imagining somebody listening to this who's, pursuing maybe their PhD, doing this academic stuff, trying to think about what happens next? Yeah, like how do you tell people now who are in that similar situation? Should they keep going? Should they quit and go get a real job?
I think a lot of graduate students go to grad school because they love the science and they're also buying time to defer, figuring out what do they really want that degree for. And I mean, I myself am included. I thought I was going to be a veterinarian, and then I'm like, nope, hard stop. I'm going to do a PhD instead. But I don't think I asked myself when I made that decision, do I want to be a professor? Do I want to work in academics? Do I want to work in industry? Do I want to do research at the bench? Do I want to be, traveling in front of people? Do I want to be an entrepreneur? I just said, I like fancy, expensive horses and want to do research on them. So I really think that it would have been smarter had I asked myself those questions. But I also think it would have been helpful if my mentors, my PhD committee, my major professor, the university groups provided some coaching and insight on that. But universities look really good when they graduate a lot of PhDs. So they're certainly not going to tell you that a higher education is bad for you. They're going to tell you to pursue the highest degree possible.
Right.
And so I just think that there's a huge disconnect between the pursuit of higher education and academics and what the job market really demands. So, I mean, I do talk to students about this and I feel like I crush them and I break their hearts. But I mean, the reality is the world doesn't need that many PhDs.
Mm,
And I mean, I had to create my own job to give myself a good career and path forward. And I'm fortunate for that now. And my education has definitely helped me. But if I didn't pivot and become an entrepreneur, I don't know where I'd be
you'd be
employed right
making $21 an hour at that first
now.
job.
Maybe. So I don't know. I've had this conversation with a lot of PhDs, and it's humbling, but it's also super frustrating that
Yeah,
we're kind of put in this position, and we paid to be in this position. Like I paid a
right,
lot of money for my education
right.
to only not be competitive in the job market.
A lot of money and time. I think you mentioned that in the first conversation we had, just what the opportunity cost, right? You're pursuing this one thing for 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is. So truth be told, I've been anti-college for a while now. And there are little things here and there that, there's exceptions to every rule. But do you have any suggestions on, like, how do we fix that? Because this is something I'm actually pretty passionate about with my kids. And as I look to, like, how do I mentor them? How do I put them on the right path, from an early age? Is there anything we can do to start to fix that?
Actually, I mean, I think that the school system for K through 12, it's so destined and being college bound. For Career Week, when I was in school, they brought in the parents with the coolest jobs. So that was the one kid whose dad was a football player, the one kid whose dad was a baseball player, and then there was the accountant, and we were all super bored because the football player or the baseball player. And so I really think that early education does a really poor job at exposing people to what kind of jobs are out there.
Mm,
I own a company that uses artificial intelligence to evaluate embryos, but I cannot write a single line of code.
mm,
Super boring to me. I wish that maybe I had been taught how coding could be more applicable to different things early on, and maybe I would have been motivated to learn it. But I'm like, I want to work with animals. I'll never need to know computer science or anything like
right.
that. And,
Yeah.
famous last words. So I just think that exposing kids to what really is out there in terms of careers could help them make choices for themselves. And if they go to college, great. If they learn a skill set on their own, more power to them.
Mm,
For animal science, there's a lot of jobs in animal science beyond being a vet. Animal nutrition is a huge one.
mm.
Animal health is, huge, obviously. But then there's all the animal products that we use, from pet toys to horse trailers to different tack and gear and stuff like that. So you can have jobs working with animals outside of being a vet, but I definitely hadn't even considered that when I was going into college.
That first job that you got, the $21 an hour job after you had well, I guess you skipped your master's, but you had a college degree at that point.
I had a PhD.
You had a PhD. Okay. Could you have done that job without a PhD as a high school grad? Maybe not a high school
I
grad.
know that some of the people with that job were file clerks that they promoted up to embryology.
Okay, there you
So
go.
yes, I think so. I think that I did love college. I learned a lot in college. I think it taught me how to think, but are some of the degrees necessary? Absolutely not. But I do think that in the ag field, I do know of a high school program that's trying to teach students about embryology, cattle embryology, which I'm
Hmm,
like, whoa, like how cool is that?
it's pretty cool.
And so, I mean, I think the schools are trying, and I don't have kids, so I don't really know what the school system's like. But I just think that schools are so crowded and overpopulated
Yeah.
that they have to, kind of lower their standard to get everyone above that bar, that they really can't like give specialized insights to every kid to make them career ready right out of high school.
Yeah. Yeah, so we actually homeschool, and that's part of the reason why is because it's just I mean, one teacher to 30 students. It's like what, and it's no secret, right? I mean, there's actually been several studies done now where they've looked at like all the different factors that go into how well a child learns, And all the different factors you could measure, they all have like, basically they make negligible differences on the outcome. The one factor that has like a real significant, it's like either 1 or 2 standard deviations or whatever it is. The one factor that's most significant is one-on-one tutoring. And that went into that's part of our choice to homeschool is like, well, I'm pretty sure we could do a much better job if we're just one-on-one tutoring our kids all day. But, then there's the whole thing about like AI might be that one-on-one tutor someday. So like, I think there will be improvements to education overall. But I also think I really appreciate your perspective about kids getting that exposure, because even in my tech industry, I'm always looking for like, how could I, like, what kind of entry-level job could I give a high schooler? They wouldn't have to have a degree. Maybe they don't even know how to code yet, but maybe they can test the code. Maybe they can just like be the delivery guy, right? Who's like taking, like if it's a hardware product or whatever, right? Like take it to the shops, learn that industry, be a little bit more boots on the ground, right? And I think the more that companies can do that, I've thought a lot about just the private sector. Like, seems to me the private sector should be the one pumping out the PhD qualified people where there's a clear business value add for that. I mean, I think there is always a case for sort of science for science sake, but I think we're just way too heavy on that right now. Anyways, this podcast isn't about me. I can't stop myself when I start thinking about this subject though, because I just feel like there's so much that needs to change with higher education. So if anybody's listening, go do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And back to the point about PhD too, like I just think that I like your advice about like really just thinking about kind of what you want to do, because I think there's things we can do for work and there's things we can do for the love of it or for hobbies, as it were, not to like be too generic or boil things down too much. But hey, if you love science, like go get a meaningful job that actually pays the bills, and then you can have hobby projects on the side, or, a lot of people go back to school in the evenings, right? Or take online classes or whatever to just continue to do the things they're interested in. And at some point that might lead to a meaningful job that can match your standard of living wherever you are. But I do think that it's hard to see that clearly as a young person. So also as young people, go to people like Cara who can give you this great advice and can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, well, I joke. I'm like, okay, I do a PhD project every month now. Like, why did my PhD take 3 years? Like, we're cranking out projects so much faster than we ever did in grad school.
Great point. Great point. Okay. I do want to get back to Embryotics, though. I know that was a big tangent. Going from that PhD, like you said, you realized there was a real market need with some of the folks that you were talking to. They were asking you to come down and run the system you designed and built with your PhD, run it on their cattle embryos, I think you said. So just kind of take us through that journey of Embryotics. And the podcast is How Not to Build. When I first asked you about Embryotics, you said it was a nightmare. So maybe also, take us through some of the things that went wrong and what those learnings were for you.
Sure. So I'm working my job, $21 an hour. I loved my PhD research. And I'm like, gosh, life was better as a graduate student in many ways. I felt like the research was more meaningful than what I'm doing now. How do I get back to something that I'm passionate about? And I ended up sitting on an airplane, a Southwest flight, next to a woman named Kimberly Graham. And we were just chit-chatting. And she had been recently hired at Texas Tech University to run some of their entrepreneurship and innovation programs. And we were talking about my research and that I was recently graduated. And she's like, you should start a company. And I'm like, how? Why? Don't even know how to get started. And she's like, look, like we're doing some programs where we are creating a safe place for entrepreneurs to learn. These programs come with funding. We can help set you up for more grant funding. She's like, you should really apply to my accelerator and we can help you. And I was like, well, that sounds kind of fun. Like I can get back to my PhD research that I was so passionate about, but also have a career path forward. So I was talking to this with some of my friends who knew nothing about embryos, and they were like, oh my gosh, this seems like a great idea. We want to help you. So we put together a dream team, which I'll put that in air quotes because I don't know that it was the dream team. But it was myself, my husband, who is a electrical engineer, computer programmer, a mechanical engineer who was going to, redesign our whole system and make that work, and then a accountant who decided to be our CFO. And we are team players. So we're like, okay, every single one of us is going to get 25% equity. So 4, 4, 4, and 4. And we're going to take this to market. The intentions of everyone were totally pure and on the same page at that point in time. I thought we're making a great decision. We looked phenomenal on paper. And we went to the university and we said, hey, look, you have 4 educated people here, diverse backgrounds, good skill sets. We want to commercialize this technology. And they were like, what technology? I'm like, my PhD research, there's a patent on it. And they're like, okay, yeah. And it was pretty much valueless at that time. So they gave it to us for $12,000. And then we had the rights to commercialize that technology. But when we started making money, we would have had to pay royalties.
Okay.
So my technology
So that was that was before Texas Tech, correct? That was the other where you did your PhD.
My PhD was also at Texas Tech.
It was also at Texas Tech. Okay, so it was another program within Texas Tech that you were shifting to. I see.
Yes, and so this was not a student program. This was so I might be getting this wrong, but I believe that when Obama was president, he signed it into law that any federal funding needed to have like this broader impacts and commercialization potential to it. So after that went into effect, a lot of universities started getting innovation hubs or innovation centers, which would be kind of like liaisons between entrepreneurs and university research to try to be that intermediary to help university research get out into the commercial sector, which I think is awesome. I think that has been a really good use of federal money and grants and trying to get the billions of dollars of research money out there to help people. And so the woman that I mentioned, Kim, she was the person who was that intermediate between the university and the commercial sector, who was hired to foster startups, especially working with university innovations. So I did not have to be a student to be part of that program. It was like a community extracurricular program that supported entrepreneurs.
Okay, so then with that 12,000, you bought the IP essentially from Texas Tech, and then once it goes through the innovation center there and gets commercialized, you would just pay royalties back to the university. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So at that point in time, we had proof of concept. We had good results scientifically, and it was good enough for posters. It was good enough for publication, and it got the job done. But what I didn't realize, because I didn't have this experience, is that just because it was scientifically valid doesn't mean that industry will adopt it. I had the opportunity to do a test with a rather large, high volume IVF lab where we used it on, I believe, 600 embryos in 1 week. And I realized that this device that you had to manually fill with culture media, take the embryos, spend a couple minutes on each one, was not something that they were ever going to use. And so it was like, oh my gosh, like the workflow of this is completely prohibitive to ever being adopted commercially because no one has the time to use this device.
Right.
So that was a hard wake-up call, but we had a mechanical engineer on our team. So it was like, okay, can you like help us redesign this to make it better? And I mean, all 4 of the founders, I think, were under a lot of pressure at that point. My device wasn't exactly working in the commercial industry. So then I was putting the pressure on this other person to save the day for us. We had a CFO who was sitting there doing nothing, and the rest of us are like, well, you're lazy. But we didn't have any money for him to do anything with. So like, what did we really expect? You know, I think hindsight's 2020, but I think I have a lot of clarity on this now. But at the time, it was a really emotional situation. The 4 of us were fighting. And we really just had this team conflict that we couldn't get over. And so we had to make the very difficult decision to dissolve the company. And that was really, I think, the first time in my life that I truly experienced failure.
Mm,
But I was like, we're not going to give up, or at least I'm not going to give up. I learned a lot from this. I made great connections through that entrepreneurial district at the university, and I want to keep going. Like, I had some ideas of how it could be done better. And so after that company dissolved, I went back to the university and I said, hey, I'm sorry it didn't work the first time, but I want the license back. And they're like, oh no, this is our flagship technology. Like, this one's going to be worth millions of dollars because we've done a good enough job, like raising some money, winning some contests, getting those commercial pilots, that they didn't see all the dirty details behind the scenes of the technology not working and it being too clunky to fit an industry. They just saw the shiny exterior
of
of they
course.
got a pilot with a big company. And so they were like, we're not going to give it back to another startup.
Wow. Even after you spent years on the PhD and pioneered the first company, lived through the imagining like D-Day or something. We just went through D-Day, right? Like lived through the first war experience with it, and then they're like, no, sorry.
That's what it was. But unfortunately for me, it wasn't a quick no. It was a very like long, strung out no
Yeah.
where I had no job and no income. It was give us a business plan. And I mean, it was a hard situation, but there's also some nefarious things happening behind the scenes that I also didn't realize.
Mm,
Like one of the ask that they gave to me in pursuant of that license was to bring them an LOI from a big customer. I did that. They gave the license directly to my customer and undercut me. And I'm
mm,
like, are you kidding me?
mm.
So now only are they not
Jeez.
giving the technology to me, they gave it to someone else. And it ended up being a process of retaliation against me where the university really wanted to get me out of any involvement with that. They wanted to protect the professor that also had a role in developing that technology.
Mm,
And really, there was no place for me to be involved with this research anymore, which it took
jeez.
about a year to go through all this before I finally said, you know what, I give up. I don't want this technology anymore. I wish I'd come to that realization sooner. Right
Dang.
now, advice I would give to anyone is own your own IP. It's so much better that way. So,
Mm,
Embryotics was a nightmare because it was really the loss of some of, my good friends after that team conflict. And then it was the loss of my good standing with the university. I found out that the university's interests weren't always pro students and pro alumni, and that they didn't always make the best choices. And that actually has resulted in a lawsuit, which has been
dang.
under review for about 2 years now. So I've been fighting for this for years at this point, and it's a nightmare. But I think that we've learned a lot from it. These are mistakes that we're not going to build. So, yeah, for how not
Mm,
to build a startup, I would say don't rely on other people's IP and
mm.
be very careful with your equity.
How, so I guess like tell us a little more about how to avoid that. I mean, because you came from the PhD thing where like what was there any in hindsight, would there have been any way for you to own your own IP? Like just given the context of your story, you did the initial scientific work as in your PhD, you came back to build a product around it. I mean, would it have just been better to just have a clean break, have a new idea, take what you've learned and build it in a way that would have been your own, maybe?
So, I think a good way to think about this is think if you're a student, the university is the company that you work for. If you work for any corporation, um, you probably sign some type of non-compete with
Mm-hmm.
them and you need to disclose any conflict of interest. So I can't use university labs, university money, university materials and expect to own the IP of that product. If I did something completely independently on my own and didn't use a dime of university money, that would be a different story. Kind of like, if you worked for Google and you said, you know what, I want to create servers and offer cloud hosting, they would say, no, that's a conflict of interest with us. You can't do that. But if you said, I want to own a local bike repair shop, they would probably let you do that because it really doesn't conflict with them. And so really, there's not a way for students to directly own the IP for their technologies. However, most universities, including Texas Tech, has a way to include students in their IP. So I did get to be an inventor on
Okay.
that patent, and different universities have different policies. But as an inventor, there was a breakdown for how, if there's ever royalties, how those would be distributed. I believe Texas Tech's policy was 30% goes to the inventors, 30% goes to the college that it came out of, and then 40% goes to the university as a whole. And so the inventors of those technology could get a portion of the proceeds. And that's actually how I was set up, which was really great. I really appreciated that, which is super cool to be a student, get to have a patent.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening is I became a whistleblower, and I confided in a faculty member that my graduate school professor had a history of sharing hotel rooms with his students.
No.
And after that, he retaliated.
What in the
I
world?
thought the university would, want to get rid of the bad apples. They would want to, defend what's morally and ethically
That's what
right.
they're all about, right? I mean, that's been like half of the bullhorns in the past 10 years is all this kind of stuff.
Well, nope. They took it upon themselves to allow that professor to influence them to remove me off of the patent, which
Jeez.
also removed me off the royalty schedule. So, I mean, everything that I've learned about how corrupt university politics can be,
Yeah.
and actually how corrupt our legal system can be, it's been pretty eye-opening. I feel like we've learned from these experiences. I feel like I have a lot of wisdom now that we can share with others. But yeah, everything that I would have bet on would have happened actually went the complete opposite way.
Jeez. And Cara, you're like completely strengthening my position of being anti-college.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yeah, my wife will be happy about that. Dang, man. And that's what's led, because when you mentioned the lawsuit earlier, that's you suing them for all the stuff you just talked about, right?
Yeah, it was a pretty big lawsuit. It was dismissed the first time. A fun fact, the judge was also a professor at the law school of the university.
Oh, well, there you go. What was the grounds that he cited? How did he dismiss it?
So my lawyers would probably have a more proper response, but kind of the layperson's response is sovereign immunity. You can't sue the government. Universities are the government. So sovereign immunity. And then the fact that my Title IX complaint was untimely. So my professor shared hotel rooms with me and with other students, but I waited till after I graduated to say something about this. And so I waited too long for Title IX to protect me. Now, of course, I sued not because there's a single isolated event, but because I was retaliated against with the patent stuff that I mentioned, the license stuff that I mentioned. They did.
Oh, they did that first. Why did they take you? What led to them taking you off the patent in the first place then? I don't think I was clear on that.
Oh, sorry. Because I told my friend who was faculty at the university, wonderful person, this professor, and I was an alumni when I said this, that my professor shared rooms with their students. And she was like, I can't be faculty at this university and not report it. So she reported it. He was investigated by HR or whatever body investigates this. He knows that that claim came from me. He also knew I wanted that license. So I'm assuming he marched into the patent office and said, hey, I don't think you should give her that license. She's not going to make money.
Are you kidding me?
And by the way, she's not even an inventor. She didn't even do anything. So let's just go ahead and remove her name. And
so they retaliated against you first because you were the whistleblower. And then when you filed the lawsuit, they said, oh, you're retaliating. And so they dismissed it, essentially?
Well, I wasn't retaliating. I was taking it through the proper
Right,
circuit, which
right.
was a lawsuit with all the facts. But then it was dismissed by the judge before it went to trial
I see.
because of sovereign immunity. You can't sue the government, and because it was untimely. So when I was taking
Jeez.
off the patents and everything, I was actually volunteering as a mentor in some of these programs. So that was an unpaid position, but I did have to go through like a background check and stuff like that to be a mentor. I honestly didn't think that that was a major position in this case. But they also use that to say mentors don't get Title VII protection. And when I took this up and appealed it with the Fifth Circuit, they agreed with the original judge's opinion that I also didn't get Title IX or Title VII protection. Now, the way the law works is there's different circuits that represent different parts of the country.
Okay.
They can have different rulings on these things, but one circuit is not above the other. So you can't say, well, if I lived in New York or if I lived in Florida, I would have won this case. They would say yes, but New York or Florida is no better, higher, or lower than the Fifth Circuit. So our ruling stands.
Hmm.
So our only other option, because there is split case law in this case in regards to who gets Title VII protection, is with the Supreme Court. So we're rallying.
Wow.
We filed a petition with the Supreme Court.
Wow.
And, the chances of the Supreme Court taking this case is very low. It's less than 1%. But, since doing this, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say that they were harassed or abused while in college. And the same as me, if I spoke out then, they would have found a reason not to graduate me. So,
Jeez.
now I'm getting retaliated against, but it probably wouldn't have been like they're obviously not above retaliation. So if I complained then, they would have retaliated and I probably wouldn't have gotten my degree or something like that. So, I mean, I really feel like it's a
Jeez.
damned if you do, damned if you don't
Yeah.
decision. But,
Well, that's how they kind of
according to
get.
the
That's how they
court,
get you, right?
yeah. But according to the courts, you have to be timely, which is what I failed to do. So, I mean, the laws don't really protect the people that they were intended to protect.
Man. Well, number one, I'm so sorry, Cara, that you've had to go through all of that. Number two, I'm excited to get this episode out and hopefully spread some of the awareness and the word on this thing so that hopefully it gets more attention and can get handled the proper way. And I'm sure
they say that the Supreme Court will take cases that are of extreme public importance. So we need to get this thing out there.
Okay, well, there you go.
There's a challenge.
Yeah. So don't just like and share, everyone, for my sake. Go to Cara's. What should they do if somebody wants to support you in this? What's the best way to support you?
I think media. I think, we can get news stories and stuff like that, because juries and judges are not supposed to be influenced by the news. They're supposed to be influenced by, what's actually in the brief and the evidence that comes to. But I mean, they're not above public pressure either. So I think that there's this concept of the court of public opinion. And if we can influence that court of public opinion, that'll put pressure on some of these groups. And we're not doing it for me. We're trying to do it for all those students that are in this situation right now and are powerless to act on it. So once you win or lose a lawsuit, it becomes prior law. And so if another student behind me wants to complain about harassment or retaliation and I lose, they're going to point to my case and say, hey, it was ruled that she had no case. You don't have a case either.
Right.
So that's where this gets tricky. And I did not know that prior to embarking on this lawsuit venture.
Yeah. I guess that's what they call case law, right? It's like once a ruling comes down. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I guess anybody listening, if you're at all part of the media world, feel free to share or probably reach out to Cara directly. If that's okay, can I say that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll have her LinkedIn links and stuff at the bottom in the show notes. I did not even set this up when we were talking about college earlier, because I think to your point, exactly, it's like, this isn't just about Cara's experience, it's about everybody who's gone through and been part of those exact same experiences. And if we hope to improve anything, right, improve our college, higher education systems, stuff like this has to get handled correctly and resolved and individuals protected.
Absolutely.
Boy, there was several things I wanted to circle back on, but we're actually running low on time. So I want to, we'll have to do another one, Cara. We're definitely going to have a follow-up in a few months. But so Embryotics went down. You're still fighting that fight. You went through those trenches and you didn't give up. You decided to continue on and start EmGenisys. Tell us, what is EmGenisys? How are you doing EmGenisys differently?
Absolutely. So, all this chaos over not owning my IP, I'm like, in the future, I want to own my IP. And at this point, I've spent 10 years of my life trying to solve this problem. We are going to solve it. So ideation for EmGenisys came about in 2020. And by 2020, camera technologies were really good. And machine learning, artificial intelligence was starting to gain traction and gain awareness in the marketplace. I was like, hey, if an embryo is a living, growing organism, shouldn't we be able to capture that activity in a video recording of it, just like 30 seconds? And can we use machine learning to analyze that video data to predict if the embryo is alive and healthy and capable of making a pregnancy, or is it dead and dying and not capable of making a pregnancy? So EmGenisys is my current venture that we created to do digital analysis, software analysis of embryo health in real time. Fortunately, I was the first to want to look at real-time videos of embryos, so we were able to get our own patents on that.
Nice.
And we've taken this product from ideation in 2020 to now a commercial product for use in cattle, which is on the market today. So I've spent the past 5 years doing research to see if my hypothesis would even work out. And when we got some proof of concept that it did, we trained machine learning models, built a web-based platform, and created a product that people can interact with.
Awesome. And I think in our first conversation, it was, are you currently only targeting the cattle industry? Because it sounds like it can be used for broader other applications as well. Is that the future thing?
Yeah, so we own the IP for all mammalian species. We picked cattle first because there's a readily available market with no regulatory barriers. So we decided to go there first.
Nice.
But no, we are doing studies with other species, including human IVF, so we can make this product accessible for use in other species.
Awesome. So then going back to your learnings from the first company, maybe very quickly, approaching the founding team, and I think you mentioned stock options as well. How are you doing that differently with EmGenisys?
So, I was like, okay, I'm not going to start a company with friends ever again. And I'm not going to get us in a situation with equity where there could be a tie that we can't, stalemate ourselves out of. And so, I said our first cap table with Embryotics was 4 people, 25% each. So my recommendation now is you have to have an imbalance of power. There has to be a way to break a tie going forward. I didn't get that right with EmGenisys right out of the gate either. I worked with some people and we weren't really sure what our involvement was going to be. And so we created a cap table that wasn't really investable going forward. And that, the founders doing most of the work, me, myself included, as well as a veterinarian, we didn't have majority or, large majority ownership of that company. And that doesn't mean that the other people weren't important. It just means that we didn't really set it up right. And so
there was just 2 of you when you started EmGenisys?
And some IP attorneys, which is how we were able to secure our IP. And it was a great team. Like, don't get me wrong. It's just our cap table wasn't the right balance to be investable. The attorneys believed that their value was maybe at a higher rate than what myself and the veterinarian was doing. So, their contribution was definitely significant, but was as significant as people working 70 hours a week for years at a time.
Yeah.
And so I got really lucky. When I started fundraising, I met a lead investor who had a really eloquent solution to this problem, one that I definitely can't take credit for. but one that's worked really well for us. So what we did in our fundraise is we got all the founders to agree that we are going to implement a really large 30% option pool into this round. That means that this is unassigned equity that nobody owns. And so we all need to compete for it in the future. So option pools, if the company were acquired today, the option pool would just go away and our equity would be distributed as if it wasn't even there. But because we have 30% equity unallocated, this makes room for people to vest interest in the future. It makes room for new people to come in. And with those vesting schedules, you can really award the people who are working hard. Startups, to no fault of the founders, you don't really know what your job is going to be. Kind of like what I said earlier about Embryotics. Our CFO didn't have anything to do because we had no money. So we can't really fault him for not working as hard, but does he need to be compensated at the same rate as people who are working really hard? So what you can do with those option pools is you can reward some people early, but then there's still pie left on the table for, those late closers who come in later. And at the end of the day, it just seems a little more fair, a little more equitable. And then you have that carrot to dangle in front of people that says like, hey, if you keep working hard, you can earn more equity and, get compensated that way, because startups are notorious for bad pay. We like compensating in equity. So that gives a little more equity that people can earn later on in the game.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, that seems super smart for the reasons. And, going back to Embryotics, it's like, you had 4 people, they're all excited, they're young, they've never done it before. And so like, how would any of you know any better? And so this, I suppose you could have went and, tried to get startup attorneys and all that involved, but that's money that nobody has, right? And so
we had startup attorneys. They didn't,
and they didn't. Okay.
They were just like, okay, what's your equity breakdown? Let's, write it in. So,
okay.
Just because you have an attorney doesn't mean they're going to solve all your problems.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so, and most startups don't have those good resources. And I certainly had no idea about option pools and stuff like that. But I would love for this podcast to give founders that piece of advice, because it removes a lot of friction and it creates it for future success and not just, a structure that makes sense on day one. Because no company should be the company in 5 years that they were on day one.
Yeah. And you're totally right that it sounds like a good thing. It's like if it's you and one other person, it sounds like a fair, equitable thing to be like, hey, let's just do 50-50. But you just run into that problem, like you've mentioned so many times, with stalemates with, voting. And then also like, oh, well, he does tech and he does business. And like, we don't need both of those equally. And then we also need 5 other skills that we can't even predict right now over the next 2 years. Yeah, I love that. That's super smart to do the option pool and be able to dole that out and kind of attach it to some kind of either outcomes or time investment. It sounds like you're kind of considering both of those things. Who's working the hours, who's taking on those roles, and assigning value to those roles over a period of time.
Honestly, go to ChatGPT, tell them your situation, ask for a stock option plan, and it comes up with something that it might not be perfect, but you know how ChatGPT works, like it gets you pretty close.
Yeah. That's okay. That's actually really smart, because now I'm thinking too, I was exploring a partnership with somebody last year and it was a little bit dicey. Again, we were both well-intentioned, but it was a little bit hard. And I'm thinking now, if we had both just sat down with the same ChatGPT window and just every single sentence we typed, we both agreed on describing our situation, that would have been a very neutral way to get a pretty objective opinion about how the partnership should be divvied up, right?
And at a fraction of a cost of an attorney. So, yeah.
Smart, Cara. You're smart. Okay, then maybe we're out of time. How much more time do you have?
I have more time. I don't want to bore.
You have more time? No, not at all. Not at all. I just know as founders, we're all so busy. I don't want to take up, more time than what you have. But I do, I guess, if we have time, I'd love to talk about, you guys have the founding team, but you've also leveraged beyond that. In order to build your product the last 5 years, you've leveraged contract engineers. How do you sort of roll them in to that? How has that gone to kind of continue to build the team that's building the product?
I mean, so I'm a biologist by training, and so hiring engineers has been really hard for me. One, they're expensive, and two, I'm not good at technical interviews. So hiring them really has been challenging
Mm,
during the early days. And I'm super thankful for these people. I was working with student engineers doing, some projects. And these projects, they didn't create my product. That's not what they're selling today. But they gave me enough proof of concept. They gave me data where I could go get money so I could hire,
nice.
more senior engineers, because I think Embryotics made me a little gun shy about giving out equity and stuff like that.
Understandably.
You really kind of want to, test drive the car before you buy it. And so, I mean, I really believe that if you pay people a full rate, then you don't owe them anything. And so, that's what contractors allow you to do. You pay market rates, you agree to that contract. If it works out, you renew the contract. If it doesn't work out, then okay, you don't owe them anything.
Right.
You're not stuck with dead weight on your cap table because you paid them in equity. It just sets the way for you to part ways free and clear. So, I mean, we have worked with some contractors, and actually, some of our contractors we promoted to be internal team members and
Yeah,
ended up
good.
giving equity, but we started out with contract positions for those people. So, I mean, I think startups are a really fluid structure. And so, I think hiring people as contractors allows you to test each other, if you're a good fit for each other to work in the company. And then if you do want to create a more formal role for them, then everything in the past is behind you. You paid them
Yeah.
for that. You don't owe them back pay. You can just create the relationship going forward.
And then you said you used students for a lot of that. I can't remember. Did you use offshore at any point?
I haven't used offshore.
Okay.
We've thought about it, but everyone's been in the US that we've used.
So to pay for those students, they were obviously probably a lower rate than you would have gotten for senior engineers off the general market. How did you come up with the money to pay those folks?
Some of them didn't get paid. Some of them,
Okay.
we had an amazing professor who he came from industry and then he went into academics. So he really approached academics with that. I want to make my students competitive in industry. And so he would pair me with some of his students and I would let them, present our stuff as their class projects, and they got class credit for some of this. And so, some of that experience just came through them working for class credit through my relationship with their professor. Some of those people I ended up hiring for some projects
Nice.
after that. I've definitely written letters of recommendation and, been there to support those students. It sucks when they leave you, but
Sure.
also I didn't exactly like working for no money after
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I graduated. So I completely understand the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's smart. There's actually a guy I need to follow up with because which one? I think he might be at SMU, I want to say. But anyways, he's got some program where he's trying to do that same thing. He's trying to bridge the gap and say, hey, here's a bunch of students, they can work for a lot cheaper. He does still charge for them, but they work for basically dirt cheap. But then that becomes basically their coursework for that, 3-month period. So it's kind of, they're getting the educational side. They're also working in the industry a little bit. I was pretty excited about that
I mean, I
setup.
didn't exactly get paid in grad school, so I think
Yeah.
students accept the fact that they're going to work below market rate. And, when I say that they were able to get me some money, so I was able to take the traction and the proof of concept, and I was able to use that to win pitch competitions. And, we ended up winning about $1.6 million at these
Nice.
competitions. And so then I could hire some more senior talent, and then some of that senior talent ended up managing some of that student talent. So it ended up creating jobs for both of them. But I mean, when I tell you we bootstrapped, like we really bootstrapped and got kind of scrappy with the way that we got this stuff done.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so then for EmGenisys, you touched on this a little bit, but tell us what's the next big thing for you guys? What's the next milestone? When do you hope to hit it?
I mean, right now, our number one focus is driving revenue. We were able to get our product launched. We're trying to get these labs onboarded, working in different continents. And we don't need to work in different continents, but if that's an area for opportunity, the beautiful thing about software is we can scale it overseas. We don't have to worry about tariffs.
That's
And
right.
so, if we can get the whole world, why not? So, I mean, our big goal this year is to drive revenue and get to a point where we're profitable and able to reinvest that into taking this to other mammalian species, human IVF, and the goal for me is to get this company acquired by a large animal health company.
Awesome. And to that end, who are you looking to connect with? How should they best connect with you?
Absolutely. I mean, looking to connect with anyone who's interested. That includes investors, that includes customers, engineers, other entrepreneurs who want to collaborate or connect, have peer resources. I do believe that there's a lot of power in networking. So if you find any of this insightful or interesting, I'll probably think that you are insightful and interesting.
Yeah. So get on LinkedIn, connect with her. Like I said, we'll put that in the show notes, and any other social media handles that you want, Cara, we'll put in there. Well, thank you so much for giving me a little bit extra time. I think it was well worth it. I think we covered some good stuff, and you have a lot of learnings. And honestly, to me too, like when you hear somebody who's been through that battle before, that's got to be gold to investors, right? They know you've lived through it. They know you have the grit to get through it and to keep pursuing the thing that you care about. So you're going to do awesome. I can't wait to hear your revenue numbers in 6 months. Thanks so much, Cara.
Well, thank you, Dan. Yeah, this was fun and really appreciate your time and this opportunity.
We'll talk to you later.
All right, have a good one.